Hey everyone. So my goal today is to go start to finish on a shirt and showing you what I use, why I use it, and all the information that you need to be successful in doing an embroidered shirt. So I did a video the other day showing the spring showers design that I bought and manipulated in software. I'm using Embroidery software. You can see that video tutorial here, and it will show you how to do the editing and curve your letters and how to use BX fonts and bring them in. And there's going to be a lot more of those tutorials coming, but that one is specific to this shirt. So you need to have a shirt, and in that video I also gave links of some of my favorite shirts. This is one of my favorite shirts. It's a really cute design and it comes in several colors. I love this shirt. So there is a link in that video for this shirt and for an anvil shirt that I really like, for a few sweaters that I really like. The one that I'm going to use is actually from Fred Meyer, but I found one on Amazon that looks similar and I bought that one for myself for a future shirt. So anyway, this is what I'm using today. It's a regular cotton thin sweater. I like ones that have hoods on them. This one has a hood as well. I just think that they're fun. But if you do get one that has a hood, just keep in mind it's an added element, something that you have to also be careful not to let it get underneath the hoop. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Obviously all the arms and the excess material. So one of the things that to keep in mind when doing a shirt. So another thing to keep in mind is thin versus thick. So I will go over stabilizers and why I've picked the ones that I've picked that I feel pretty strongly about. This is a thin sweater, and most of mine are kind of thin, even though now I live in Idaho, so I've been buying more thicker ones because it's cold. But so as far as stabilizer, it really, well, we'll go over that specifically, but you want to stabilize it. If it's really thin, you kind of need to stabilize it more. If it's really thick, you don't need quite as much stabilizer, but there's different pros and cons with that. So like I said, we're gonna go start to finish. So right now I just have my shirt. I have not put any stabilizer in it. I did get my hoop. I'm going to use my 8x12 hoop, and I have tear away in my hoop. So whenever I do shirts, I do tear away in the hoop. You will hear lots of different things from lots of different people with what they think works best. You figure out what works for you. I do tear away. I feel very strongly about tear away. When I first started doing shirts 7 years ago, wow, almost 7 years ago, I used cutaway because there's this adage, what you wear don't tear, something like that. I don't remember exactly what it is, but so I followed along and I did that, and I was really unhappy with the results because what happens is that after you wash it, that cutaway wrinkles all up and your shirts are always wrinkled. The appliques are all wrinkled, and honestly, I haven't made a shirt in quite a while. I did that Baby It's Cold Outside one and the Candy Cane Lane one, but other than that, most of my shirts are lots and lots of years old. So, and they look really great, I think. So I do not believe in cutaway. Mesh cutaway I think is great for quilts. I don't think it's great for shirts personally. Tearaway works really well for me. So that's my suggestion. And I use World Weidner tearaway. Let me grab that. So this is my roll of World Weidner tearaway, and I get the big one. I think it's like 50 yards. And you can get it on Amazon. There's a link underneath this video for World Weidner tearaway. You can also get it directly from World Weidner if it's hard. Sometimes every now and then it's hard to get on Amazon. So I like this one. It's the right thickness. So when I first started, I used, or after I figured out like tearaway, I was using Floriani tearaway. And it's more expensive, and I kept poking my thumb through the tearaway. This is the right thickness. I think it's 1.8. Kimberbell has tearaway, but it doesn't say the thickness on it on the roll. I can certainly investigate further, and it might be the right thickness that I like. They have a medium and a thick one, probably a light one as well. But this is what I have on hand. It is World Wiedner tearaway stabilizer, and it works great for me. So one other thing that I do, sorry, you're gonna have to put up with me in this camera. So one thing that I do is after I hoop my tearaway, I take scissors and I cut around these little edges, and you don't want it super close because you want to make sure it stays in the hoop, but it's one less thing to have to worry about when you're trying to get your hoop situated within your shirt. So that's just one little tip that I do. I always cut off the little excess corners. I'm making a mess. So that's one thing. Like I said, we're going start to finish. So it just makes it so that it's a little bit cleaner when you're getting it into your shirt. All right, so let me turn on my iron. All right, while we're waiting for the iron to get hot, I do it on the hottest setting. I use just a regular Shark. I think I got it at Target. It's a great iron. It works really well for me. I do not fill the water reservoir. That's another tip. I use a spray bottle. I keep a little handy, spray bottle handy. There's also a Kimberbell one, which I have, and it's cute. So I use water this way, and the reason is because if you don't clean out that reservoir and that water gets all mucky, it will get on your shirt. So I don't ever fill the water reservoir in my iron. I use a spray bottle. So while we're waiting for the iron, make sure and get your design onto your USB stick, bring it over to your machine. And like I said, there was an entire tutorial yesterday about how to create the design and to manipulate it and do some fun things to it. So for now, we're just going to work on getting the shirt ready. All right, hopefully you can see this. I have this little cheapy tabletop ironing board. That's what I use. Use what works for you. This one works for me because I can get it out of the way and still utilize my table. So for your shirt, this is what I do. My shirt has, I didn't even realize this, but this will work out just fine. There's little seams down each side of my shirt, and that's fine because I'm doing a long design. So that worked out really well. So I get my stabilizer. All right, this is important. Let me change the direction. All right, excuse the mess over there. That's my little bin of Kimberbell projects that I want to work on. So, stabilizer. This is fusible mesh cutaway. This is not SF101. I use this. It is World Wiedner fusible mesh cutaway. And oh boy, do I swear by this. Let me show you why. Okay, this is SF101. It is great for quilts, for in the hoop projects, for lots and lots and lots of things. Not great on shirts. If you have a thick sweater in a dark color, you could probably get away with this just fine. But look at the difference. If I can do this, let's see. All right. This should show you, hopefully. See how this is more transparent, and this is very, very opaque. Thicker and opaque. It's great for stabilizer. I like SF101 a lot, but for shirts, you want something thinner, you definitely want fusible, and you want it more transparent. So like I said, if you're using a thick sweater and it's in a dark color, this would probably be okay. I don't like that in shirts you can see stabilizer around your design. And I'm going to show you a tip after we're all done of how to fix that, but it really is easier if you are using a transparent or a little bit lighter mesh cutaway. So this is the Kimberbell fusible backing, which is great for quilting. Great, love it. but again, it's very opaque. So hopefully you can see the difference. All right, does that show you? I think that should show you, hopefully. Sorry for the lighting. So they have their own uses, right? In my opinion, I don't want this on for my shirts, and I don't want SF101 for my shirts. I want this, and I've used a few different brands, and my favorite is World Weidner. It's World Weidner fusible mesh. So when you, there's a link, I'll add a link. When you find it on Amazon, be really careful, because you can type up at the top bar fusible World Weidner fusible mesh stabilizer, and you'll get a whole bunch of options, and some of them are not fusible, and you don't realize it until you bought it and you're like, oh, I got a good deal on it. But just make sure to check it, because even though you write fusible up in the search bar, it doesn't always come back with the fusible options. So fusible mesh cutaway by World Weidner, I swear by it. That's what works really well for me. All right, our iron is ready. Let me put these away. All right, so we went over tearaway and we went over fusible mesh. There's more, but we'll get there. All right, so all I do, you can be, my daughter actually prints out her pattern and puts it on her shirt and knows exactly what size of her mesh that she's gonna use, and she's really careful about it. Great, that is certainly more cost effective. I don't do that. I just put it down on my shirt and determine the size of the shirt, and it's definitely bigger than I need, but that's what I do. All right, and then I just cut a piece. Sorry, I'm a neat freak. You can't tell because of the mess behind me, but I am a neat freak, so I will be cleaning as I go. So one other thing, and I'll tell you more about it later, but in addition to your regular iron for your shirts, you're gonna want a little mini iron, and you'll see why in a little bit, but this one is great. I bought it a bunch of years ago, Sunbeam. It works super great, and it's like the right size. I bought this teeny tiny one and never used it. That was a waste of money. This one is great. All right, so once you have your fusible stabilizer and your shirt, let me move this. Okay, so I've cut a piece of fusible mesh stabilizer. I want to make sure that I have the I don't know which, shiny side up, that side that is the fusible side, and I'm going to put that inside of my shirt. As you can see, I've got a piece that is bigger than I need to have it, but it gives me a little reassurance that I am just fine on size. So what I do is I put it inside of my shirt. You could turn your shirt inside out and get it just right that way. This works for me, not as perfect, but it works. And like I said, I've got enough of a piece big enough that I don't need to worry about it being exact. So then I've got it inside. I make sure that the fusible side is up on the back of the inside of the shirt. And then the other thing that I do is I feel around. So I can feel that the top of my stabilizer is here, and I can feel that the bottom is here. And that's plenty big for my design, but I don't need it so high, like right up here, because my shirt, I want it 2 inches, about 2 inches from the top of the collar. That is what my preference is. I have a short torso, and I don't like designs. To me, if designs are down here, they're gonna bunch up because you're sitting down and whatever. I like it a little bit higher. You can see on my shirt, I have it right about 2 inches from the top of the design to the bottom of my collar. So this one has a collar that's gonna come down a little bit, but I still think 2 inches will be fine. So my stabilizer starts here. It doesn't need to be that high. I could pull it down a little bit, but like I said, I like to have a little like comfort zone that I know that there's stabilizer on all sides. All right, so once you've got that inside there, you're just gonna iron it. All right, so once you have it all ironed, you can check it by looking on the inside. If you have seams on your shirt like I do, those take a little bit longer to adhere, and you can easily see when it's done by just peeking inside. It's great. All right. All right, and then another key thing is we are going to take our shirt and exactly fold it in half. If you have a hood on your shirt, you're going to want to put your hood on the front part so that you can line up your arms and shoulders exactly right so that you can determine the center of your sweater. All right, you can see. And then just make sure it's all lined up. There will be little wrinkles in here, and so it's a good idea to get it as straight as you can get it. And this is determining the center of your shirt, and that comes in so handy when we are hooping our shirt. So my seams are lined up. All right, and then you're just going to iron that center to make a crease, and we will use that as our hooping guide. Okay, so once you have that all done, you want to check it. So it could be that you had a fold in the wrong place, and I will say that a sweater is harder than a shirt, and one that doesn't have an exact center. So you can see on this sweater how it comes over here instead of coming down the center. That makes it a little bit harder too. But if you can just line up your shoulders and your arms and then do a visual, and you can see that it is perfectly centered. So that's all good. All right, now we are going to get it in our hoop. So this part can be a little tricky to some people, especially if it's your first shirt, but it gets easier with time, I promise. So I am a pin freak. I feel very strongly about pins, and like I said, it does take a little practice, but then it's not so bad at all. Other people use clips. So when I first started, I bought a whole bunch of these little clips, and I did it that way. And you know, you got to do what works for you. I like pinning. I think it's a little bit more precise, and I feel more comfortable with it, but whatever works for you. All right, so I am laying down my shirt. Let me change direction here. All right, I have my shirt back. I've got that center seam, and I've got it back on my board here. Now this is a really important thing. I turn my hoop upside down. I always do it. I always do it. So when you get your machine, when you get your design out to your machine, you're going to have to absolutely remember to turn it if you do it this way. But you'll see it makes it so easy to not have to get, especially if you're doing an applique, you're going to be taking that hoop on and off of the machine, and trying to get it under the bulk of the neck is so hard and such a pain. So I always turn my hoop upside down so that the part that attaches is on the right. When I have a shirt, a design that goes this way, then the attachment part would be on the bottom instead of up at the top. So I put it inside of my shirt, and like I said, you can do your shirt inside out. I've done that before, but I prefer this. All right, and then once you get it in here, let me see what you can see. All right, then you are going to feel for those little notches. There is a notch here on the end of each side of the hoop. You're going to feel for that and use that as your guide for that line that you made, this seam, the ironed seam that we made. So you're going to feel that down until you feel that little notch there. And you'll get used to this, but I mean, you can certainly peek, but you can feel it. It's right there. I have my line going right to it, and same thing here. So since we're using all of the hoop, depending on what size hoop you're using and what size design you're using, I'm using all of my hoop. My design takes up pretty much all of my hoop. So I'm going to want to be accurate in placement. So if I have it here, and this is the top of my design, this is actually really good. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pin now. So I use these pins. They are thicker than those little sewing ones that you can just sew right over. They are thicker. I think I bought them at like Walmart or something. I don't know, but they make it really easy to pin your shirt. I'm not sure how to show you. There we go. All right. So I start at the center top and I push the pin in and I put my fingers underneath and I use my finger to guide the pin back up, and I use this finger here to push it through. I hope that you can see that. I'll do the whole thing and hopefully you'll see some of them. And like I said, it just takes some practice and getting used to, but some people have a hard time with pinning. So the other thing I do is I push my pin all the way up against that hoop. I can feel the hoop, and especially since my design is taking up my whole hoop, I have to be really careful to get it as close to the end of the hoop as I can. And you saw I'm holding up my hoop and being careful not to push my finger through, which is a lot easier to not do on this using this stabilizer. But I am guiding it with that finger that's underneath the hoop and pushing it, just the pin, through. And I'll tell you, it's harder when you are using a design that takes up your entire hoop. So what I could do, this is my 8x12 hoop, and my design is basically 8x12. I could hoop this in my 9x14 hoop and still use the 8x12 design, and that would give me some more room for cutting the appliques and some more room for my pins. So keep that in mind when you are doing your pinning. If you'd rather do it in a bigger hoop, you could certainly do that, no problem. So I'm just feeling the hoop and pushing my pins there. So once I have a couple up at the top, then I want to do the bottom so that everything stays straight. So again, I lift up the hoop, I've got my finger underneath, and I guide it, holding it up against the side of the hoop. Take some time with the pinning. Don't rush this part. I get messages from people saying that they just can't pin it. And like I said, it takes practice, but you have other options. You could use those little clips. You could use a basting stitch. You could definitely use a basting stitch. And you know what's really cool is I just found out that Embroidery Essentials, that software that I'm testing out now, you can add a basting stitch like really easily. I'll share that on my next tutorial, but that was awesome to find that it will do that for you, and you can adjust it to whatever size you want. It's like the click of a button, easy, super easy to do. All right, so I have the top all pinned and the bottom all pinned. I have both sides to do. And you can see I do a lot of pins. I don't do one here, one there. I do pretty much back-to-back pins. But you could use a basting stitch. But you still, even if you use a basting stitch, you would have to hold it down enough to be able to get it positioned right. Do you see how I use my fingers to push it through? See, that's another nice thing about that little tabletop ironing board. I can move it to how I want it, and I can get it out of my way. Okay, my shirt is all pinned. You can see it, I do every little bit, the whole thing, all right? So now we're ready to get rid of all of our excess material. And this part I use this blue tape. So there are a few different types of blue tape. This one works, and I've had a lot of people tell me on our last shirt video that they agree that some of them, they come right off. This one is really strong, and I will add a link to it. I get it on Amazon, and it just holds really well. If you get that cheapy one that doesn't hold very well, what you can do is you could put a pin in here to help hold down the tape. Put it through the tape and the fabric or your sweater, and that will help hold it. So you want to just get all of this material to be not under the hoop, all right? And I'll show you a little tip. So I generally do one side at a time. If your shirts are larger or your hoop is smaller, it's a little easier. When you're doing little kids shirts in a big design, it can be challenging to get all the parts up. And what I do on the kids shirts, if I can't get it from under the hoop, then I will cut open the side seam. I do that on pretty much all of my grandkids shirts. It's just easier for me. All right, so once you have everything off from the back of the hoop, you can see I'm not done. I've got part of it. Because if you get all of it at once, it kind of goes like this, and I find it easier if I do bit by bit. So what I do is I fold this top part so that it's not this big bulk. You fold the beginning part to the back part and then tape it. This can be especially challenging on a thick sweater, but I've done all of them. I've done thick and thin and made it work. All right, so big piece of tape, really sticky tape, 3M, great tape. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but I will add a link. And I tape from close to the pins, so close to the bottom. I'm not going on my shirt. Do not start your tape here and go over. You're starting right about where your pin is, which should be right at the edge of your hoop, and then you're stretching it to the back. All right. And I do that pretty much all the way around. All right, so on that side, but then on the side that has the attachment, you don't get to utilize that. So remember, rolling. Can you see this? I roll it. So if I just do this whole thing, I've got a big lump, and it's harder to get under the needle. It's harder to get your hoop on and off. So I roll this front part to the back part like that. And then I get my tape. And all the way to the back. So notice I'm also not doing so far into the hoop that it's going to get on my stitches. You don't want a sticky needle. You're just doing to the edge. Plus that's where it's stronger anyway, because the other part of the hoop is there. All right, so we can't do this part that has the attachment. So we do right before it and right after it. And you can even do it at a little angle to utilize. Okay, once you have it all cleared off of the back and you've got your tape just right, then you still have to do all this top part. All right, so make sure that it comes up from the back of the hoop all the way. See, it's all cleared. So what I do is I use my arms, the sleeves, as a little tie for my hood, and I tie it over, under, whatever works. And this is not going to hold it for sure, but it will help. And then you can pin it. But you absolutely do not want any of this going under your hoop. We've all had it happen, and we've all learned from it. Get all the way done with your design and find that the sleeve is attached to the back or something like that. It's a huge bummer, so we don't want that happening. So see, I tied in front of my hood and behind my hood, and then there's still these pieces that could get pulled underneath the hoop. So what I do is I either pin it or tape it to a part of the shirt so that I can always see it. It's not necessarily so that it will hold, but so that I always know where it is, so I know to watch for it. All right, so you could also pin it, whatever's gonna work. But be careful for that, the edge of that pin when you're moving your hoop on and off your machine. All right, so same thing, the other sleeve. I just want it somewhere where I can see it at all times, because if it suddenly disappears, then you know you have a problem. All right, and you want the shirt, the top, all of this bulk. This is what I was saying, that if my hoop wasn't turned around, I'm getting all of this from underneath my hoop, my needle every time. And oh, that's pretty close to impossible. I mean, you'd have to like really push it down and manipulate it and get it turned just right. And it's hard. This is a lot of extra material because you have, if you have a hood, if you have the sleeves, and you have the excess material that you pulled from the back. All of this part here is now here. And if this was at the top of your hoop, that's just a lot of material. So the other thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that this isn't down here like this. You want to make sure that it is pulled all the way back. All right, and you would want to watch that throughout the process. You want to always check every now and then, just check and make sure nothing got pulled under the hoop, because they like to get pulled, don't they? We know that. All right, so that looks pretty darn good. Very messy, but pretty darn good. And you can see I've got that floppy part that I'm just gonna always make sure it's not anywhere near my needle and not getting pulled under. So I have a nice big lump here, and it's on the bottom part, so it's not gonna be a problem. All right, so then we're gonna start on our design. All right, so we're about ready to get started. So get your USB stick, bring it over to your machine, but you also need to get your fabrics ready. So you can cut as you go easily. Like, in fact, I often do that, where I will have my design, and once it says I need an applique piece, then I measure it with my little tape measure and cut a piece that I need. But I prepared my fabrics ahead of time. And you do want to always obviously pick out your fabrics ahead of time, because that's the longest part for all of us, right? We all sit there going, oh, well, what about this? What about that? And so on that, I want to talk about that. So I had a different plan for this shirt, and then I ended up, you know, we all do that, we go back and forth on it. So like I've shown you on other projects, pick out a starter fabric, a focal fabric, all right? I picked this one, which goes so fun with my lavender sweater, right? So start with that, and then from there, pull out colors that go with it, all right? So this is gonna be my boot. This is my bow, the bow on my boot, and I think that that will go really well. And initially I was going to use like a teal or a green, and then I realized that the bow is mostly inside of the boot. And so what will this do? this will pull out, since it's going to be on top of the boot, mostly on top of the boot. The bow is mostly on top of the boot. This will pull out the color of my shirt, right? So I think that that will be really fun. So that's what I chose for my bow. For my tulips, I'm using this bright pink with a little design on it. And then there's this little tiny piece that is the inner part of the boot that you're really not going to see very much, I don't think, but I chose this because it goes nicely with my boot. All right, so you're going to cut those fabrics. I'll give you some information. The boot fabric, this one is my boot fabric. So the boot fabric, you're going to cut to 6 by 5.5. But what I did is I cut it 6 by 6, only because I don't want, it's a 1/2 inch difference, and I don't want to sit there worrying because it's not going to be at a glance quick and easy to see which way is which way. So I just did 6 by 6 on mine, but it's really 6 by 5.5, and that's a generous cut. You could even do it a little bit smaller, but I did 6 by 6 on my boot. For my bow, it is 4.5 by 3, and I'm using this cute little lavender gingham. 4.5 by 3. And then for my tulips, I'm using this one, and it is 6 by 3.5. 6 by 3.5 for the tulips. And then for that tiny little piece of lining, that is supposed to be the inside of the boot, I was going to do something really fun like polka dots. I thought that would be super cute. But it really is a little bit, and there's flowers coming out of it or stems coming out of it. So I decided on this, and it's 3.5 by 2. 3.5 by 2 for the inside of your boot. Use whatever works for you, but here's something really important I want to mention. So on the back of your fabrics, you could use SF101, you could use Kimberbell fusible backing, but I like to save those for quilting, and I like to use Heat and Bond Light on the back of my fabrics. Heat and Bond Light, it works so great. Let me grab it. It comes in a roll. I think you can also get it in sheets, but I buy the roll, and it's this, it feels a lot like SF101 actually, but it's paper. So it's paper product with sticky stuff on it. And all you do is I lay down my fabric on top of it, and then I use my little cutter. I use this to use my rotary cutter and cut along the sides. So I just put the fabric right on it and cut, and that makes it easy for me to know what size to use. And this stuff works really good in applique. So in our quilting, we use SF101 or fusible backing or whatever, and even the fusible mesh stabilizer. Those are great for quilting. But for appliques, when you use the Heat and Bond Light, it makes it so that you, after all of your applique pieces are done, they're all down, you are going to use your little iron, and you're going to iron them in the hoop. Don't take it out of your hoop. Lay down your shirt or sweater with all of your applique pieces on and iron those down. And what it does is it adheres them to your shirt so that there's no bubbles, there's no movement, and even later when you're washing and drying your shirts, it's not going to get all ruined or bubbly or wrinkly. I like Heat and Bond Light for applique shirts. So all you do is you iron that paper stuff onto it, and before you put down your applique piece, you are going to take up the paper part. I seem to always tell you guys, oh, just do this, and then I don't do it, and I'm not prepared. Sorry. There we go. Okay. So take off the paper part, and you'll feel it's not sticky, but it's like it's got this extra layer, and you can see that it is glossy. I don't know what to call it, but it's not sticky, it's not anything, but when you iron it onto your shirt, that part melds onto your shirt, and it is going to just adhere it better so that there isn't any puckering or anything. So that's what I use on shirts, is Heat and Bond Light. I use it on all of my pieces, my applique pieces. All right, and like I said, make sure to take off that paper backing though. I haven't done it yet except for that little bit of the one that I showed you. So do that. So one other thing that I'm gonna do on mine is I'm gonna use a piece of vinyl on my boots. I thought that that would be really cute. I am not an expert on vinyl. I don't know to tell you which ones can be washed and which ones cannot. This is not the Kimberbell vinyl. It's actually, let me get it. I have this huge roll, huge roll. I didn't realize it was this big when I bought it, but I have this huge roll of vinyl and I use it pretty often actually. So I know that this one is washable. I will add a link in underneath this video if I can find it on my Amazon. I bought it a long time ago and I mean, I think it'll probably last me the rest of my life. So I used this. I made my grandkids all snow globe shirts one year and I used this and it worked fine. We all got snow globe shirts and it washed fine. So there are very likely some vinyls that are not washable. So I'm not an expert on it. I'm not going to tell you which ones do, which ones don't, because I don't know. But I know that I've used this one a ton of times and it works great. So I will add a link to this. There's also different thicknesses. And again, I don't know. This one was much thinner than I expected when I bought it. The first one that my daughter gave me a long time ago was thicker. And that one worked great. And I just assumed it would be the same and it's not. This is thinner. The Kimberbell vinyl is definitely thicker. Again, I don't know if it's washable. It probably says on the packet. You might be able to use that. I don't know. All right. So one other tip. Let me grab it. Okay. So what you want to do, either take your fabric pieces or your fabric bundles, whatever, bring them over to your thread and choose your threads while you're getting ready. All right, that will make it a lot easier. So like I picked this, originally I had a dark lavender for my bow so that it would stand out, and then like I said, I realized, well gee, on this lavender it actually is only going to show within the boot, and so I used one that pretty much matches my shirt. So you're going to want to just play around with colors and see what works for you, but pick out all of your thread pieces and what you want everything to go with. Somehow I lost the top of this just now, but anyway, just pick out your colors, and then you're going to need a color for the word spring and the word for shower, a thread for the color, the word showers also. So spring and showers. I decided, I don't remember, I have to think about it. Oh, and the leaves. So you're also going to need for the leaves. So you know what I did is I picked 2 greens that go in my main color. So that worked really well. Doesn't have to, obviously, but that worked out really well. And then I think I chose spring is going to be in this color. And the reason is because it's further away from my bow. I didn't want it too close to my lighter lavender bow. So I picked this for the top part. And then for my showers, for the showers, it's going to be right near the boot. And so I decided on this pink for the word showers, the vertical word showers. So just start thinking about, you know, what's going to go with what, and make sure to put those fabrics against your shirt because you want to make sure that it's all going to tie in, right? All right, I think we're ready to get stitching. Let's do it. Okay, we're at the machine now. And one thing I forgot to mention, if you decide to do vinyl on top of your boot, totally optional, you could add in the tack down, placement and tack down of the boot. You could do that twice in your software. I didn't do that. It was kind of an afterthought. And so I'm just gonna move the step orders. I'm just gonna go back and redo the placement and tack down for the boot, and I'm going to do it again for the vinyl, but you could add that into your design before you start so that you don't forget if you decide to do that vinyl. All right, so we're at the machine, and like I've mentioned lots of times, I use this USB extender. I have had this same one for 7 years, and it just saves the drive on your embroidery machine. So in that that motion of putting it in and taking it out over and over again can wreck the cable, or not the cable, the USB drive on your machine. So a friend of ours in our group just recently had to get hers repaired, and it was a couple $100. And this cable is like $7, I think. I don't remember exactly, but easy thing to have, and I've had it forever. So get a USB cable extender if you haven't already, and get your USB, and let's get started. And yes, this comes in a little short one too if you want it. I got the longer one just because I wanted it to lay down on my table. I felt like that was more secure than having it sticking out. Totally optional, whichever you choose. Okay, so once you're at your machine, you're gonna open up your USB drive and click the design. And remember, if you turned your hoop upside down, you are absolutely going to want to turn this design upside down. Very, very, very important to remember. I've done it once. Hopefully you only have to make that mistake once and you'll never forget it ever. All right, so I am going to just rotate my design. I went into edit and then rotate, and I'm going to 90 degrees straight down all the way. How easy was that? Okay, so we are going to bring our hoop into the machine. You're just going to carefully want to get it underneath your needle. And so do you see how easy this is versus if I were trying to get it around all of this bulk? That's why I turned my design upside down. It just makes it so easy, because we're going to want to get this hoop on and off several times to be able to cut the appliques. So easy peasy, as long as you remember to turn your design. All right, and then you want to do a quick check to make sure that all of your pieces are not under the hoop at all. You could lift it up and feel around, and then just make sure that this top part. So now we are going to center the design close to the top of your shirt. All right, so I'm going to be reaching around my tripod, so put up with me for a bit here. So we have our design loaded, and we've got our hoop loaded. So what we're going to do is go over to the machine. Let's see how I can get you to see this. All right, if I click on Embroider, and then I click on this button that has a little arrow going around, I click on that, and I want to click on the bottom. So it's actually the bottom of my design is the top now, since it's upside down. So if I click on the bottom part, it's going to move my shirt, and it's going to be hard to see because of all that bulk, but I can move the bulk out of the way, and I can feel around. And the top, let's see, the top of my collar is here, and don't forget I have extra material at the top of my cuff because of the design. But I'm going to take my little tape measure, and I'm going to measure. All right, it's going to be hard for you to see me doing this, and it's going to be hard for me to reach around the camera, so just put up with me for a moment. So I line it up with the top of my shirt, and like I said, since I have extra here, I'm probably going to give it a little bit more room than I normally would. I really prefer about 2 inches from the top of my collar. So if I put my foot down, I'm actually at about 2 1/4 right now. That's shocking. Let me see, maybe 2 1/2. So keep in mind that there's the little hump. You've got the line of your collar, and then the little hump of extra material, and then down. And so you want to take into effect all of that and actually move your tape measure. Let me see. So instead of just going like, well, with my foot up, instead of just going like this, I am folding it down at that little hump and then out, and putting my foot down helps as well. Don't forget to watch out for your needles if you put needles on the sleeves. All right, so I am before 2 1/2. I'm actually pretty good here. So I could move it up, and I'm just going to do it just to show you how. You probably know, but just in case. So from the machine, excuse the glare. I closed my blinds, but that's as good as it's going to get in a sunroom. Let me see. All right, so I have these buttons here, and I've got it positioned down at the bottom, which will show me, see that little green crosshair right there? That's showing me the top of my design. In this instance, it's the bottom, but you get what I mean. All right, and then I'm going to say okay. And then I would go to the edit screen and to the move button. And then I get a different set of buttons right here. And I would just use that to move my design up. You can see that it's coming down in this scenario, but it's really the top of the design. All right, so you can move that all the way until it beeps. It'll tell you, oh, you're close to the end of your hoop. There we go. See how it's saying, no, I can't do it anymore. So you can move it as much as you want to get the look that you're going for. So I'm going to go ahead and position mine probably 2 1/4, just because I have that extra material up at the top, but generally I like 2 inches. So you have to decide what works for you. I have a short torso, and I don't like designs down low that are going to bunch up at the waist, or also placement matters. So like if you have bike tires that are going to be positioned in a certain place, you know, things like that. You just want to keep in mind your body and your shirt and where you want your design. But generally 2 inches works well for me. I like it a little bit above my chest so that you know, whatever. I'm not going to go into detail, but you decide what works for you. But generally, rule of thumb for me is about 2 inches from the top of the collar. All right, so I moved mine to right about 2 1/4 inches. Let's see if I can. Nah, I'll get 2. So the top of my collar is right here, and I'm doing the design right there. Sorry, my fingers are in the way. One other thing to keep in mind is if you do it too high up, you're going to be battling with making sure all this material stays out of the way. Whereas if it's a tad lower, you've got a little bit more comfort zone to not worry about the extra fabric. All right, after you get your design placed how you want it, say okay. And then what I like to do is I go back to this screen, the little rounded arrow. I should learn what these button names are called to help. But anyway, I press that, and then I like to go to the middle of the design and to the bottom of the design, and that will show you too how far down it's going to be on your shirt. And that can be helpful, especially in a long design. Most designs are horizontal and up here, and it's not a problem. But as you do a vertical design, especially a long one, it's going to go lower and lower onto your tummy. And so that's something to keep in mind too, for whatever look that you're going for. It totally is a personal preference. But I like to use these buttons to help me see where everything is going to stitch, or where the placement is for the design. All right, everything is hooped and the design is turned and everything's ready. I am going to get started. I like to use a color of thread that I don't use often to use it up. Like if I bought a big variety pack, then the colors that are used less often is what I use under my applique pieces, because you're not going to see them as they'll be covered by the satin stitching, but it uses up what I have. If you don't have any colors that you want to get rid of, I find yellow to be a really great color for applique pieces because it's easy to see and to trim. All right, the first design is the placement for our boot. All right, so we're going to do our first applique piece. Don't forget to take off the Heat and Bond Light, the paper part, and we are going to just put the shiny part face down so that the applique piece is face up, and completely cover your design, your applique placement stitch. And little girl has come to say hello. Lily, come here, baby girl. Hi, honey. She's my little girl. She's a good girl. All right, so you saw that I use my fingers to make sure that the applique piece stays down. You can, after a bit, after we get all of our applique pieces, we will use our iron to iron these down. But in the meantime, you just don't want any bubbles, or you don't want it to stick up in a certain way. So I just watch it. You could certainly tape it in place. That would be the smart thing to do. I generally don't do that, but that would be a smart thing to do. Lily, she's a good girl. All right, and then we are going to take our hoop off. Actually, I always take it off. If you're smarter than me, you trim in the hoop with it on attached. I've seen people do that. I can't do that. I always put it in my lap. And you're not supposed to do that because you could pop it out of the hoop, but I've never popped it out of the hoop, and that works for me. So did you see how easy it was to get the hoop off though? That's why I turned the design upside down. All right, so trim your first applique piece. All right, once you have your applique piece all trimmed, normally I wait until all the applique pieces are put down, and then I iron the entire design in the hoop before doing the satin stitching. But if you have any pieces that overlap, then you would want to iron in between those. So I'm going to iron this one, and then I am going to add a piece of vinyl, that clear vinyl, on top of my boot. And so I'm just going to back up a step and redo the tack down. All right, like I said, I normally wait until all the pieces are down, but I'm going to go ahead and do it for this one because I'm going to put vinyl over the top. I'm using my little Sunbeam iron. It fits great in the hoop, and it's nice and hot, and it works wonderfully for this use. If you have a big hoop and a big design, then you could probably use your regular iron, but this one works for, this is my 8x12 hoop, and it fits really well. And then there's also all the kids shirts that I make, and so you would want to make sure to have a small enough hoop that you can iron in the hoop when you're using Heat and Bond Light. All right, so didn't need to take that long, but I did, and now it's really hot. So I like to wait. So you don't need to worry about Heat and Bond Light with your needles. If you were to do it super hot, maybe wait just a second so that it won't gum up your needle. I've never had any problem. I've never had it gum up my needle or any kinds of issues. I use Heat and Bond all the time. I will again add a link to the needles that I use that work super well. I just have not had any problems with the needles that I choose. You could also iron out your seam now if you choose, so that it's not underneath your applique just while we're waiting. Not at all necessary, but the purpose of that line was to place in your hoop, and we're already past that point, so you could definitely feel free to iron that out if you choose. All right, I always just feel under the hoop and make sure it's not still hot. I don't know why. There's probably no reason to it, but that's what I do. So we are going to want to, if you're doing the vinyl and if you didn't add that step, you would just easily go back a step. So we're on the bow right now, and we want to go back to the tack down of the boot. So I'm just going to go up a step. Sorry, I'm reaching around my camera to see. So this will tack down our vinyl, and I'm just going to lay my vinyl on top of my boot and let it tack that down, and then I'll trim that before we do the bow. So now one thing is you have to be very aware that if you add vinyl to your boot like I'm doing, you would not want to iron your entire design after that point. You don't want to iron vinyl. All right, the vinyl's all tacked down, so we're just going to trim it. All right, see how fun is that to have a rain boot that's like a little slicker. All right, put it back in your hoop. See how easy that was. Oh my goodness, easy. All right, and then we are going to run the placement stitch for the bow. All right, get your applique fabric. Don't forget to take off that paper from the Heat and Bond Light before you put it down over that placement stitch for the bow. sticky side down. It's not sticky, sorry, shouldn't say sticky side, but the glossy side down. Fabric face up. And then we're going to run the tack down stitch. Easily remove it from under the needle and trim your applique piece. All right, once your applique piece is all trimmed, then we are going to put it back under the hoop and run the placement stitch for the tulips. So remember, this is a design from Embroidery. There is a link under this video for this design, and we added the wording Spring Showers. Spring is Mariah font by Stitchtopia, and I thought it was Maya when I was saying on the previous video, but it's actually Mariah, my mistake. I love Maya, and Mariah I haven't used before, and I love it. There's a cute little heart on the eye. That's adorable. So anyway, there are links underneath this video for the design. We used Embrilliance essentials for our merging the designs and for the wording and curving it and all the fun little stretch activities to stretch our comfort zone and abilities. All right, once you have the placement stitch for the tulips, then don't forget to take off the paper backing from the heat and bond and put the fabric face up over the placement stitch of your tulips. Hi, Archie. Hi, Archie. You're so cute. You're so cute. Hi, Archie friend. Hi, Lily. All right, and we have the tack down, so we are going to trim. All right, once you have your tulips applique piece all trimmed, we're going to run the next applique piece. So one thing I want to point out is this is why I was saying that yellow is a good color for applique piece trimming. I used that pink, and I could barely see it, and you just want to make absolutely sure that you're getting all of the pieces, then put it under your hoop and run the placement stitch for the next fabric. All right, as expected, that one for the inside of the boot is tiny. I make sure to take off the backing of the heat and bond light, put the fabric face up, covering that little bit, and run the tack down. And that's why it's a good idea to tape down your fabrics. Did you see it moved? And thankfully I had plenty big enough piece that it didn't matter at all, but good reason to tape your fabrics in place, which I generally don't. All right, time to trim. All right, once you have that last applique piece trimmed, do you remember what we're going to do? Very, very important step. Now we are going to iron down all of the pieces that have the heat and bond, and we're going to be careful not to get our piece that has the vinyl on it, because we already ironed that down and we want to avoid the iron touching the vinyl. So we are going to iron down these pieces, the applique pieces that have the heat and bond light. All right, so this is the benefit of having a tiny little iron, is I don't need to worry about going over that part that has the vinyl. I can be very careful and get all of the parts that I do want and get close to the other areas. So we're just ironing it down to have that, to activate that heat and bond gluish factor that is on our applique pieces, and then we're going to wait just a moment for it to cool down before we start on all of our satin stitching. It's looking pretty interesting so far. It'll be fun with the satin stitching. Okay, we're done with the iron. If you want to turn your iron off, I am using the thread that is for my boot. You could certainly use a thread that is for the inside of your boot if you want. I'm using the same as my boot for the thread, and it's just that small little piece here, and there's going to be stems and leaves in there as well. right, once you have all of the wording done, we're going to trim the little jump stitches that are between some of the letters, but otherwise pretty darn good. All right, so remove all the tape and then take out all of the pins. All right, and then you're gonna untie all the little knots you made, or take off the clips if you used clips, and remove from hoop. All right, and then you're gonna turn it over and tear away all the extra tearaway. And then what I do is I get a pair of tweezers. These are great tweezers for this. And then I take away all the tearaway that is inside of the applique pieces. And remember, I was saying at the very beginning of this video that if you use cutaway, what I found is that stuff wrinkles when you wash it and dry it. So this, you're tearing away all the excess. There's nothing that's going to wrinkle. The tearaway is underneath the stitches and everything else is being taken away. How easy that was. So the very first wash, any tiny little pieces left over are going to come out anyway, but I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So you just get all of those pieces of tearaway out. And then we have another thing. Hold on. All right, the last step is to iron the top of your shirt. And you want to do this for a while. Don't rush through this process. And the reason isn't to get the wrinkles off of the front of the shirt, which it will certainly do, but the reason is actually to warm up that fusible stabilizer that is inside of your shirt, because we are going to pull that to the stitch line and cut it. And if we were to just rip it off, you could easily just rip it off, but what it does is it leaves all that little sticky, not sticky, but the bumpy parts that are what makes it iron, that would stay on the inside of your shirt. And so this way, we're going to iron it and warm it up. We're going to warm it up and pull that fusible tearaway or fusible stabilizer away from the shirt, and it takes off that bumpy stuff so that nothing is inside of your shirt. It's nice and soft because of the fusible stabilizer, and there's no bumpiness, there's no extra stabilizer. I see I missed a jump stitch. So we're just warming it up, and I generally do it in parts because you want it when it's really warm. So if you do the whole thing, by the time that you get to the last part, it'll already not be warm enough, and when you're pulling it away, you'll get that bumpy stuff on there. So I generally do it in bits. Now, if you did not use vinyl on your boot, you could use your big iron, but if you have if you did that vinyl like I did, then you want to make sure to have a small iron that you can go around the vinyl without touching it. So once it's all warm, you are going to pull easily. See how easily this comes off? You pull this to the stitch line and then you trim it. And it is easier on a shirt than a sweater, but it's very doable. All the way to the stitch line. So can you see this? See how you can see the stitches right there? So, and then you're just going to trim it. And then after you trim it, I'm going to keep doing it so that I get all of the sections. But be very careful here. What I do is I put my finger under here so that I can guide the scissors that because you don't want to cut the sweater or shirt that you just worked so hard on, and you're just doing it, I don't know, a 1/4 inch or so away from the stitch line, or more if you don't feel comfortable going that close. But like I said, I put my finger in here so that I'm not going to get my sweater, and then it'll end like this, and I'm going to just keep doing that until I have all of the excess stabilizer trimmed away. So there is a tiny bit of puckering over here at the letters, but once we remove that excess stabilizer, that's going to go away, because it's only doing that because of the stabilizer, because of that extra stabilizer. So you'll see it'll go completely away once we trim that extra stabilizer. See? And if you're quick enough and you have a big iron and you didn't use vinyl, you could do all of that in one, get it hot enough, and then very, very quickly pull away from all 4 sides. That would work fine. But I generally like to do it a bit at a time just to make sure and get all of the little bumpy things. So you can see I'm going close to the stitch line, but then there's this part, and that will end up wrinkling up in the wash, and so I'm going to iron it a little bit closer and cut away the closer to that stitch line as well. Right now it looks totally fine, but once it's out of the wash and dryer, you'll see that that stabilizer will wrinkle up because it doesn't have anything really attached to it. So I'm just gonna warm this up in here so that I can cut away that extra stabilizer that's on the inside part from this font to the boot. So see in there. So you have to be really careful cutting, obviously. Okay everyone, I made my spring shower sweater. Are you gonna make one? I can't wait to see it.